Accra, the heartbeat of Ghana, buzzed with energy day and night. Cars honked incessantly, markets overflowed with vendors calling out their wares, and skyscrapers pierced the sky as symbols of ambition and wealth. Amid this chaos stood a palatial mansion in an exclusive neighborhood. This was the home of Niaje and Amasirwa, one of Accra's most prominent power couples. Their success was envied by many. They owned multiple businesses, traveled the world, and lived in luxury. Yet behind the gates of this grand house lay a hidden truth. Their only son, Kojo, was desperately lonely. Kojo was an 8-year-old boy with curly hair and big, curious eyes that once sparkled with joy. Now they often stared out the window, searching for something he couldn't name. His days were monotonous, spent either with the house help or in the sprawling but eerily empty mansion. He longed for his parents' time, their stories, their laughter. But every morning, as the sun rose, Kojo watched Niaje and Amasirwa rush out, their minds preoccupied with meetings and profits. "When will you be back?" Kojo would ask, but the answer was always the same. "Later, Kojo, be good for us, okay?" On days when business trips came up, Kojo was sent to stay with his grandmother, Nana Akua, at her home on the outskirts of the city. Unlike the bustling life of Accra, her house was quiet, too quiet. Kojo dreaded these visits, though he never quite understood why. Something about Nana Akua's gaze made his skin crawl, a discomfort he couldn't explain. Despite his protests, his parents insisted, "Nana Akua loves you, you'll have a wonderful time with her." But deep down, Kojo feared those visits would rob him of the little peace he had left. Nana Akua's house stood at the edge of the city, surrounded by tall trees that swayed gently in the breeze. The home was as grand as her reputation, white walls adorned with vibrant Kent-patterned curtains, polished floors, and shelves lined with artifacts and photos from decades past. To the outside world, Nana Akua was a picture of dignity and grace. Her silver hair was always perfectly coiled, her colorful Kent robes draped elegantly, and her gold bangles jingled softly as she moved. To Kojo, however, the house was anything but welcoming. It felt cold, as though the walls themselves were watching him. Nana Akua's charm could disarm anyone, except Kojo. "Ah, my grandson," she'd exclaim, pulling him into a hug that lingered a little too long. Come in, you must be starving." Outwardly, she was all smiles, cooking his favorite meals and spoiling him with gifts. Yet, her piercing eyes held something Kojo couldn't put into words, something that made him want to shrink into himself. Whenever his parents dropped him off, Kojo would plead, "Please, can't I stay home instead? I'll be good, I promise." But Niaje and Amasirwa were firm. "Kojo, Nana Akua loves you, you're lucky to have a grandmother like her." In Nana Akua's house, the days passed slowly, but it was the nights Kojo dreaded most. After dinner, when the house fell silent, Nana Akua would sit beside him, her smile fading into a stern expression. Her presence felt suffocating, and Kojo's instincts screamed that something wasn't right. Despite the warmth she displayed to the world, Kojo saw cracks in her mask. She wasn't the kind-hearted woman everyone believed she was. In his young heart, he knew he wasn't safe. At first, Kojo's visits to Nana Akua's house seemed normal. She cooked his favorite jollof rice with chicken, and even brought in new toys. During the day, she spoke gently and told him stories about her youth. "Kojo, when I was your age, I had to fetch water from the river before school," she'd say, her voice full of nostalgia. For a brief moment, Kojo thought maybe his fears were misplaced. But everything changed when the sun went down. As darkness enveloped the house, Nana Akua's demeanor shifted. Her kind smile faded, replaced by something cold and calculating. She began sitting too close to Kojo, her hands lingering on his back longer than they should. The first time she hugged him tightly, he thought it was a mistake. But soon her actions became unmistakably wrong. One night, she whispered words that made his stomach twist. "This is our little secret, Kojo," she said after touching him in ways that made him feel ashamed and scared. "Don't tell anyone, they wouldn't understand." Kojo lay awake that night, his heart pounding. He didn't know what to do. His grandmother was supposed to be someone he trusted, but now she terrified him. He wanted to tell his parents, but the thought of them brushing him off again made him feel hopeless. Every visit to Nana Akua's house became a nightmare he couldn't escape. The more she insisted on keeping their secret, the more trapped he felt. He began to withdraw into himself, dreading each trip to her home. For an 8-year-old boy, the burden of this secret was unbearable. Kojo didn't know it yet, but this would be the beginning of a long fight for his voice and freedom. Back at home, Kojo tried to express his dread about staying with Nana Akua. "I don't like going there," he said softly one evening. His parents barely looked up from their work. "Kojo, we're doing this for you," Amasurwa replied, her tone dismissive. "She's your grandmother, you're lucky to have her." Kojo's protests fell on deaf ears. He didn't know how to explain the fear that gripped him. What words could he use to describe what was happening to him without being told he was imagining things? At school, Kojo's once vibrant personality dimmed. He used to race his friends across the playground and tell jokes that made his classmates laugh. Now he spent recess sitting alone, tracing patterns in the dirt with a stick. His teacher, Madame Afia, began to notice the change. "Kojo, is everything okay?" she asked one day, kneeling to meet his eyes. Kojo hesitated. For a moment, he thought about telling her everything. But Nana Akua's words rang in his ears. "They won't believe you." So he looked away and mumbled, "I'm fine." Madame Afia wasn't convinced. She started paying closer attention to Kojo, wondering what could be troubling him so deeply. At night, Kojo cried himself to sleep, clutching his blanket like a lifeline. He wished someone, anyone, would notice his pain and help him. But his parents were too busy, and Nana Akua's threats kept him silent. His silent cries for help grew louder in his heart, but he couldn't bring himself to speak. Deep down, he wondered if he'd ever escape the shadow that loomed over him. The nights at Nana Akua's house became a torment Kojo dreaded with every fiber of his being. One evening, after dinner, Nana Akua's usual smile turned into a stern, icy glare. She ordered Kojo to follow her to the bedroom. "Lie down," she said, her voice devoid of warmth. When Kojo hesitated, she grew impatient. "Do as I say, boy." Terrified, Kojo obeyed, tears streaming down his face. He begged her to stop, but her response was chilling. "If you tell anyone, they won't believe you," she hissed. "And you'll only make trouble for your parents." Her words cut deep, leaving Kojo paralyzed with fear. He cried himself to sleep that night, praying desperately for the morning to come. In the daylight, Nana Akua returned to her warm, doting facade. She prepared him breakfast as if nothing had happened, smiling sweetly and calling him, "My dear boy." But Kojo could no longer see her as his grandmother. To him, she was a monster in disguise. At school, the weight of the nights haunted him. He stopped talking to his friends altogether and spent his days in a haze of sadness and fear. His nightmares followed him everywhere, even in the safety of the classroom. Kojo wanted to scream, to tell someone what was happening, but Nana Akua's threats were chains that held him in silence. How could he explain this to anyone? Who would believe a child over a respected elder like Nana Akua? The nights dragged on, each one darker than the last, as Kojo clung to the faint hope that one day, someone would save him. One morning, Kojo's school hosted a special guest speaker. Mom Essie, a vibrant and confident woman, stood before the class. She introduced herself as a children's safety advocate, and spoke with a warmth that immediately captured Kojo's attention. "Children, I'm here to talk about something very important," Mom Essie began. "Your safety. You have a right to feel safe, at home, in school, everywhere. If anyone ever touches you in a way that makes you uncomfortable, even if it's someone you know, it's not your fault, and it's never okay." Kojo's heart raced as she continued. "And if someone tells you to keep it a secret, don't. Secrets like that aren't good for you. Find a trusted adult, a teacher, a parent, anyone who will listen, and tell them, I promise you, we will believe you." For the first time, Kojo felt a flicker of hope. Her words echoed in his mind. We will believe you. Could it be true? Would someone believe him if he spoke up? As Mom Essie finished her talk, she handed out cards with a hotline number for children in need of help. Kojo clutched the card tightly, his small fingers trembling. He wasn't sure what to do next, but for the first time in weeks, he felt less alone. That night, Kojo stared at the card under his pillow. Nana Akua's threats still haunted him, but Mom Essie's voice was louder now. Maybe there was a way out. Maybe he didn't have to suffer in silence anymore. The following afternoon, as the school day ended, Madame Afia asked Kojo to stay behind. Her kind eyes searched his face. "Kojo, you've been so quiet lately. Is something bothering you?" Kojo hesitated, his heart pounding in his chest. He thought about Mom Essie's words, find a trusted adult. Could he trust Madame Afia? Tears began to stream down his cheeks as he whispered, "It's Nana Akua. She touches me in bad ways. She says it's our secret." Madame Afia felt her heart break at his words, but she remained calm. She knelt beside him and gently placed a hand on his shoulder. "Kojo, I'm so sorry this happened to you. Thank you for telling me. You're very brave." Kojo sobbed as years of fear and pain poured out of him. Madame Afia listened carefully, reassuring him every step of the way. "You did the right thing by telling me now. I'll make sure you get the help you need." After Kojo left her office, Madame Afia immediately contacted Child Protective Services. She knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but she was determined to protect her student and bring him justice. For the first time, Kojo felt a small sense of relief. Someone believed him. The next day, social workers arrived at Kojo's home. They gently asked him questions about what had happened. At first, Kojo was hesitant, but their kindness encouraged him to open up. When his parents learned the truth, their world shattered. Amasurwa wept uncontrollably, clutching her chest as if the pain would consume her. "How could I not see it?" she cried. "I'm his mother." Nyai Ajay was silent, his face pale and his hands trembling. He couldn't believe the grandmother Kojo had been left with was capable of such cruelty. The investigators took Kojo to a doctor, who confirmed the physical and emotional scars of the abuse. It was undeniable. Nana Akua had hurt their son, and now justice had to be served. Amasurwa held Kojo tightly, whispering, "I'm so sorry, my son. I'll never let anyone hurt you again." The following day, the police arrived at Nana Akua's house. She greeted them with her usual charm, feigning ignorance. "Good morning, officers. How can I help you?" But when they explained their purpose, her mask slipped. "This is nonsense," she exclaimed. "I would never harm my grandson." Despite her protests, the evidence was overwhelming. Kojo's testimony, the doctor's report, and statements from other children revealed a dark truth: Kojo was not her only victim. As the handcuffs clicked around her wrists, Nana Akua glared at the officers. "You'll regret this," she spat. But her words carried no weight. Justice was finally catching up with her. The courtroom was tense as the trial began. Nana Akua sat stone-faced, refusing to meet anyone's eyes. Witnesses, including Kojo, bravely shared their experiences. The judge, Justice Aforiwa, listened intently, her expression one of deep resolve. When it came time for sentencing, Justice Oforiwa's voice rang out, "Nana Akua, you have caused unspeakable harm to innocent children. Your actions are unforgivable. You are hereby sentenced to life in prison." Kojo's parents held him tightly, their faces a mixture of relief and sorrow. They promised themselves they would never let him down again. After the trial, Kojo's life began to change. He was placed in the care of Mr. and Mrs. Tete, a foster family who lived in a cozy house on the outskirts of Accra. From the moment he arrived, the Tetes made him feel welcome. "Welcome to your new home, Kojo," Mrs. Tete said warmly, kneeling to meet him at eye level. She handed him a soft handmade blanket with his name embroidered on it. "This is just for you." The Tetes treated Kojo with kindness and patience. They never pressed him to talk about his past, but assured him they were there to listen whenever he felt ready. Mr. Tete often took Kojo on walks around their lush garden, teaching him about the different plants and flowers. "This one is hibiscus," he'd say, plucking a bright red flower. "It's used to make sable." Kojo found comfort in the Tete's gentle presence. For the first time in years, he felt safe. He no longer dreaded the night, and the darkness that once consumed him began to lift. At school, Kojo's teachers noticed a change in him. He smiled more often, and though he was still quiet, he started to engage with his classmates again. The weight he had carried for so long was slowly lifting, replaced by a sense of hope. The Tete's home became a sanctuary for Kojo, a place where he could begin to heal. Though his journey was far from over, this was the start of a new chapter in his life, one filled with love, understanding, and the promise of brighter days ahead. Healing was a slow and painful process for Kojo, but with time, he began to confront the memories that haunted him. His foster parents enrolled him in therapy with a compassionate counselor named Dr. Araba, who specialized in helping children who had experienced trauma. During their sessions, Dr. Araba encouraged Kojo to express his feelings through drawing. At first, Kojo's pictures were filled with dark, jagged lines and ominous shapes. But as weeks turned into months, his drawings began to change. He started sketching sunny landscapes, cheerful animals, and scenes of himself playing with other children. "Kojo," Dr. Araba said one day, holding up one of his drawings, "this is beautiful. It shows how far you've come." Kojo smiled shyly, feeling a glimmer of pride. The nightmares that once plagued him became less frequent. Whenever he woke up feeling scared, Mrs. Tete would sit by his bedside, holding his hand and reminding him that he was safe. "You're not alone anymore, Kojo," she would say softly. At school, Kojo began to excel in his studies. He rediscovered his love for math and science, subjects that had once brought him joy. His classmates started inviting him to play soccer during recess, and Kojo found himself laughing and running across the field, his heart lighter than it had been in years. Healing didn't mean forgetting. Kojo still carried the scars of his past, but with the support of the Tetes and Dr. Araba, he learned that those scars didn't define him. Slowly but surely, he was reclaiming his life, one step at a time. Kojo's story became a catalyst for change in his community. News of what had happened to him spread, sparking difficult but necessary conversations among parents, teachers, and community leaders. Mom Essie, the children's safety advocate who had first inspired Kojo to speak up, was invited back to the school to give another talk. This time she addressed not only the students but also their parents. "We must listen to our children," she said firmly. "When they tell us something is wrong, we need to believe them and act." Kojo's parents, Nyaje and Amasurwa, attended the talk. They had been working hard to rebuild their relationship with their son. Though he was no longer living with them, they visited him often and participated in family counseling sessions. Through these sessions, they learned the importance of prioritizing Kojo's emotional well-being over their business ambitions. The school introduced new safety programs, teaching children how to recognize and report abuse. Teachers were trained to identify signs of trauma and provide support to students who needed it. Kojo, now more confident and resilient, found his voice in these discussions. He began sharing his story, first with small groups of classmates, and later with larger audiences. "It's okay to speak up," he would say. "You're not alone, and there are people who will help you." His bravery inspired others to come forward, breaking the silence that had allowed abuse to go unchecked for so long. Kojo's experience, though painful, became a powerful lesson for the entire community, a reminder of the importance of listening, believing, and protecting the most vulnerable among them. Though the memories of Nana Akua's abuse would never fully leave him, Kojo refused to let them control his life. Over time, he found strength in his story, using it to inspire others and advocate for change. As he grew older, Kojo continued to work with Mom Essie and other advocates to raise awareness about child safety. He spoke at schools, community centers, and even national conferences, sharing his journey of survival and healing. His words carried weight because they came from the heart. Kojo also worked hard to rebuild his relationship with his parents. Amasurwa and Nyaje were no longer the distant, work-obsessed figures they once were. They showed up for every event Kojo participated in, cheering him on and expressing their pride in his courage. "Kojo," Amasurwa said one day, tears in her eyes, "I'm so sorry for everything. I know I can't change the past, but I promise to be here for you every step of the way." Kojo forgave them. He realized that holding on to anger would only weigh him down. Forgiveness was not about forgetting, but about freeing himself from the pain of the past. By the time Kojo reached adulthood, he had turned his pain into purpose. He became a teacher, dedicating his life to creating safe spaces for children to learn and grow. His students adored him, drawn to his warmth and understanding. Kojo's story was a testament to the power of courage, resilience, and love. Though his journey had been marked by darkness, he emerged stronger, finding freedom in speaking his truth and forgiveness in his heart. He had found his voice, and with it, he had found peace. Thanks for watching, and remember to subscribe on the channel to get more stories like this, and like the video.